Hi, welcome fantasy lovers to actually to our very first Fantasy Geek Out session, but it is um for the Reader's Nook. This we have met several times before. We have Rebecca here who has been on several of them, and then we have a few newcomers, and hopefully we will have another person join us in just a moment. But I am your host, Agnes Wolfe, and tonight we are diving into the magical world of A Court of Thorn and Roses, or ACOTAR, by Sarah J. Maas. This was my very first Sarah J. Maas book I ever read. I had not read any before that, so I'm curious. And I also have not gone any further than this one, so I do not know anything that happens after this. So I have a feeling I'll probably end up finding out some things I probably should. But anyway, this is not a spoiler-free one, so definitely if you have not read it and you plan on reading it at some time, ooh, yay, we have another person coming in. Then you may want to hold off on this, read, and then come back and watch it. Anyway, I can't wait to get into the details of this book. But first, let me introduce the incredible ladies who are joining me tonight. Each of them brings something unique to our discussion. Some of them are writers, some of them are aspiring writers. And first up, we have Sarah Janice, my dear friend and temporary neighbor. We're not going to be neighbors very much longer. She is someone I've had the pleasure of pulling into the fantasy world very recently, and I can't wait to hear her take on tonight's book. So, Sarah, would you like to introduce a little bit about yourself and who you are?
Sure. So I am a mom of a 5-year-old. That is my greatest thing to brag about. I'm Mama Bear naturally. I love helping people, and I was dying to be a reader, but I could not find my niche. I could not find my avenue, and that is where you came into play. Because of you, I fell in love with this book, and actually I did start the next one because I couldn't help myself. But it's been fantastic. So I hope at some point to maybe put out my own book someday. Who knows?
And next, we also have another aspiring author, and she's actually the daughter of a dear friend of mine who often shows up on here for some of the Meet the Author book clubs. But this week, I stole her daughter instead. This is Noelle Christensen. She is a fantasy lover. I've known her since she was in her mama's womb, so this is kind of exciting. And as she's babysat, I have lent her some of my books in the past, and now she reads far more often than I do. So now I think it would have to go the other way around. But anyway, welcome, Noelle. Do you want to share anything? Oh, you're on mute. Okay. It's okay. We will get you unmuted. But we will switch to Sarah Honey first. As you unmute, and once you get it figured out, then we'll have you back on. So she is also a fantasy author who specializes in crafting. Oh, she got unmuted. Crafting tales filled with hope, adventure, heart, action, humor, and the right amount of romance. She's originally from Australia. Sarah has traveled across the globe and now is in Washington State, which I'm going to be moving closer to you soon. Anyway, she's ready to hear, and I would love to hear what she's up to. Sarah?
I'm up to all sorts of things. So I write under the name SF Henny. So my debut book came out last year, which is The Last Lunar Witch. And I have book 2 coming out in December. But I absolutely adore fantasy. I was definitely one of the Harry Potter girlies, trying to put it all together, because that was coming out when I was in middle school. And since then, it just kind of rekindled my love for fantasy, and I just got into all of the reading. I have read most of Sarah J. Maas. I don't anymore, so I will caveat with that. Book 5 actually made me quit her, so you can understand what my level of romance is. But I really do enjoy the previous books that I have read of hers, but I'm definitely someone who likes a dash of romance in there. I don't mind spice levels, but I definitely like a strong fantasy plot, strong female characters with a romance that's mixed in there.
And she also may be our Meet the author for the book club in January, which I'm hoping to pin down details. So I'm excited about that. And last but not least, Rebecca Maeve Hartwell. She's been here since the very beginning. I feel completely honored to introduce her. I'll let her share the rest about herself.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I am an author. I published the Unlocked series, and I am also a developmental editor. And delightfully got to edit Sarah Henney's book, The Last Lunar Witch, which was delightful. I had so much fun working on that, and it's so much fun to now be able to interact with her in these kind of settings and just build that relationship more and more. So I started reading the A Court of Thorns and Roses series years ago when I first started writing my series because I was trying to study the masterworks in my genre. So I read The Night Circus and I read this one, studying both of them just to see why they hit the zeitgeist and how they got so popular. So it was really interesting kind of revisiting my notes from when I studied it in depth years ago, and this time just rereading it for fun. And I had a very different opinion of it both times. So I'm excited to get into that.
That's interesting. And Noelle, did you have anything you wanted to share about yourself? I think your volume is off. So, I mean, like just turn up the volume. You want to say something, see if we can get you? Okay, it does not look like it's pulling up right now. How about you see if you can get Dawn's thing? You can like turn off the thing and we're just gonna get started. You can hear us and then you will be able to pop in and we're excited to hear from you, Noelle. But I'm sure Dawn will be able to help you. Her mom's wonderful. Anyway, thank you all for joining me tonight. Now to get us started, I love to know on a scale. We're going to start with Sarah Honey. 1 to 5, how you would rate A Court of Thorn and Roses and why. And give as much detail as possible. Feel free to interject if you're like, whatever, allowed to interrupt. Sarah Honey.
I would still give this a 5, even though I don't like her writing anymore. And going through it, because I read this when it first came out, I think it was 2015, and then obviously reading it again now, I knew a lot. And even though I'm not a fan, this is still very solid writing. It's a very solid story. She does so much in this book that I definitely, and then when you get to book 2, you will see even more in book 1 that it is very well written, and I can totally understand why this is such a popular book. So still a 5-star from me.
Rebecca.
So the first time I read it, I had never read any Sarah J. Maas before, and I would have given it a 3. It was very immersive. There were a lot of emotions in there, but I found it emotionally confusing. And I felt like it was 2 or 3 stories that had kind of all been smushed together, not in the most elegant or I don't know, planned out way possible. But rereading it now, having read the second book in the series, I would give it a 4 because now I can see everything that was being set up and just how my own appreciation of writing has grown in the last 5 years or so. I can now see more in it that I think I can appreciate better coming back to it, having some idea of what's to come and being able to just relax and go with the flow on my second read through.
All right, the other Sarah. What would you rate it?
Well, I'm not a professional, so I'm just going to go with a 5 because it kept my attention the whole entire time. I was very captivated and curious about all of the characters in it, and picturing and visualizing that was really fun. So the writing, I didn't get confused. I followed it very well emotionally, and I felt very connected. So yeah, I like it.
So I had heard so many good things about it, and so I had high expectations at the very beginning. And I probably got about 30% of the way through before I finally was like, okay, I'm starting to get into it. I found it very dull at the very beginning, but I loved how she like did like all these like sneak peek, like sneak bam, whatever things to you. And so like I would rate it a 5 overall. And we'll have to get back to Noelle in just a moment when she hops back on. But anyway, so let's get started. Does anybody want to start off with the topic? Otherwise, I have a ton here that I would love to ask. Okay, I will start. All right. So, one of the things that I found very interesting, and I was curious if anyone else picked up on this, it's kind of like a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Did anyone else notice that?
Oh, 100%. And she's advertised it as that for years.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I went into it expecting Beauty and the Beast, which might have contributed to my slightly lesser opinion of it my first read, because I was expecting Beauty and the Beast, and it's kind of there, but she did a lot more and very different things with the story than I was expecting based on that marketing.
So what did you guys think about just the way that she kind of did like these sneak, I don't know, like the bait and switch and like, okay.
I'm not sure
How do
what you're talking
I
about.
explain it? Okay, so like how
Examples.
do you feel that about like how do you feel of her writing overall? I'll just throw it out that and then I will say what I was going to say about that.
I think that her line level writing is exceptionally good. I think that her sensory use and just how she holds you in that POV is really, really good. It's sort of the bigger plot stuff that I think maybe isn't quite what I would like to do with it, but her line level writing is great.
What about the romance
100%.
between Feyre and Tamlin? What'd you guys think of that, the building of that?
No comment.
No, you're supposed to comment.
Yeah, we've read book
If you
2.
don't
We
like it,
cannot
share.
comment.
So
No,
apologies.
we literally can't.
Apologies for spoilers, because I can't talk about this without doing some spoilers. I did not like Tamlin on my first read, and in retrospect, that's because I just gotten out of an abusive relationship, and Tamlin was like low key, flying those little red flags. But I couldn't articulate it because they were so subtle. And then like 3 chapters into book 2, I'm like, there we go. That's why I didn't like him. So I think that the romance was very accurate to human nature. And I think that she does a great job of portraying him as very attractive. But I also think she did a fantastic job of giving him just enough red flags and things that were a little bit ick that book 2 is allowed to pay off in the amazing way that it does with the romance.
Sarah, have you guys, so you all have read the second book?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm the only one that has not read the second book all the way through.
I started it. I'm only this far in.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I'm not the
know.
only one. What are your thoughts about the romance?
I don't know. I got a creep vibe. I didn't like it that much. I was like, okay, this is gonna get better. This has to get better. This should be better. I don't know. That wasn't my favorite. I just didn't. I don't know. It just seemed off. It seemed weird. I guess the red flags is a good way. I don't know.
And it didn't feel like either of them had particularly good motives to be in the romance. It felt like both of them were coming from really toxic places internally, of just, I need someone to love me and I need someone to love, and hey, look, he's available, or hey, look, she's available, rather than actually being an authentic connection.
Right. I think that was something that definitely nowadays that you see, like when it's like I'm not a fan of like fated mates and things like that, because it feels like it's very much, well, we're fated, therefore we have to be together. In this series, you'll hear about at least a fated mates where it was really bad, and it's like, just because you're fated doesn't mean you're good together. And so that's one thing that I feel like this kind of showed well. It was that these 2 people are kind of put together, a lot of stories do, and therefore a romance comes out. And in this way, you will see kind of what happens with it. But I very much felt like that. And back when I first read this, I was very much in my YA phase. So this kind of thing was just like stars in my eyes. Oh, Tamlin, you're so wonderful. Look at all of this that you've done for Feyre. and listening to it again with knowing what happens, I could definitely see the things and be like, this doesn't seem quite right. Like, why are they doing this? When he is, how old is he? Like 500 years or something? I can't remember. And she's 19. Age gap things are also not my thing, but but it is very much just captures what I think YA romance is, where it's you get very wrapped up in, oh, he's just so perfect, he's glorious, look at all of these things that he's doing for me, he's offering me shelter, giving me food. So I did like that aspect. Once you get to book 2, you'll appreciate it more.
Yeah.
And Noelle, are we able to get to you? What do you think of the romance?
So I never liked Tamlin, like never. Partially is that I had already been such a part of the fandom, but also reading it as someone who comes from like a rougher past, seeing some of those things where Feyre just wanted someone to love her, wanted to be accepted, and accepting the first choice she had. And it was a lot of, that's how it felt for me. Like even reading the book for the first time, and then you read the second book and see a lot more of that come through. But I rated a 5. It's my favorite book.
Rebecca, I noticed that you agreed with some of what she said. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I very much agree with the feeling lonely and unloved and all this stuff, and picking the first person that's available to have a romance with, because that will fill the holes. Yeah, totally agree with that.
Yeah, especially with her sisters. She never felt truly accepted by her sisters. She felt like an outcast. I mean, Nesta called her a feral beast at one point. So when she sees someone who actually says, "Hey, I like who you are," she's obviously going to jump at that chance.
Yeah. And it's her first chance, Feyre's first chance when she goes to the Supreme Court. It's her first chance to be herself, to actually explore her interests and not be starving and not have this debt, like bedside death debt to her mother. So again, it could have been anybody in that position of giving her that space, giving her that comfort and that kindness, and she probably could have latched onto them just as much. Could have been Lucian if he hadn't been quite so mean to her right off the bat. It could have been just about anybody in that position, in those circumstances, rather than an actual meaningful connection between Feyre and Tamlin specific to who they actually are, rather than the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So you brought up about the sisters. What do you guys think of, especially Nesta, of the 2 sisters? What do you guys think of those guys?
Well, I will start out by saying that the Nesta and Elaine combo there reminds me very heavily of my sister and I. So I think I identify with Nesta a little bit too much, and I don't think she deserves all the hate that she gets. And my sister and Elaine are basically the same person. So I don't have a subjective or an objective view on this. I've only got my subjective one.
See, at the beginning of the book, I despised Nesta. I hated her so much. And then towards the end of the book, I realized that a lot of what she was going through was through like trauma and all that she had been through. And I liked her a lot more towards the end of the book. I have quite the love-hate relationship with Nesta.
Yeah. And the fact that her morals and ethics were so unshakable, even in the face of everything that she was dealing with, of, oh, okay, well, the fairies stole my sister, and oh wait, fairies aren't bad, to the point where, near the end, where Feyre is telling Alice that if she needs to take her boys and flee, go to Nesta, and she absolutely trusts that Nesta will take care of them, says a lot. In addition to the fact that Nesta is capable enough to actually follow through on that and be helpful, I might have a soft spot for Nesta.
Especially with like Feyre, and no matter what her sisters did, she always knew she could lean on Nesta and always forgave them over and over and over again. We see that with all the books with Feyre, and like being able to like still trust Nesta and still trust Nesta and still know that if she sent someone Nesta's way, Nesta would say, "Oh, you're a friend of my sister, I'm gonna take care of you."
Yeah.
I actually really loved the evolution of Nesta, and I don't think it necessarily was an evolution of her, but it was an evolution of our perspective of her. And that's what I loved. And I just loved how it really shows how sometimes we make bad judgments. And that's what it brought to me, was thinking about, we do that in our own lives. And I love that Sarah Maas like brought that to the forefront. Sarah, do you have any opinion on that?
I just liked how driven they both were. They were very, very strong-willed. Like they all came from being well off and then ending up in such poverty. And those two didn't let it break them. They chose to be warriors and hunters and survivors, and to really step up and be the support that whole family needed. I thought that was honorable. I really enjoyed that about it. Back to the original question, though, I was enjoying listening, so I didn't add it in. But Feyre, I really felt like her love language was the fact that Tamlin was so willing to step up and take care of all of her family's needs. And, if she was like on the fence, like, okay, maybe he does love me, maybe he doesn't, maybe this will work, maybe it won't, but he took care of them. And so that probably was the swinging factor that was like, because that was her whole life purpose, was making sure that they ate, making sure that they had. And so for him to come in and to take that fear away and completely just make sure all their needs were met above and beyond, like, I could see why it would be easy to put rose-colored glasses on and then just see him in that light for that and that be enough. And I mean, it's sad because that is how you end up in abusive situations or in toxic relationships. You're just so grateful and thankful for something that you went without for so long that would be easy to fall to. But I did like in the end that Nesta was quick to call the BS on the whole thing, and she wasn't easily shrewd, and she didn't go right along with those same rose-colored glasses. So she might even been a little bit stronger than Feyre in the beginning.
I did
I would
like
definitely agree with that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say my thing about the sisters is I do really like how they were portrayed in the opening, seeing it through Feya's eyes, how you really were just like despising all of her family. Like, look at what they did to you. But then when you see them in the second part, and again with Nesta, about how she was like held onto that shard of wood and was like, I knew that something that she actually went to the wall and tried to find her sister. Like, you did see that other side of her and definitely liked her a lot more. Even though she is very abrasive, you start to understand where she was coming from.
And
Definitely.
I know one of you had mentioned this previously, but one of the traumas that I think I overlooked until it was brought to my attention is the parentification. Does everyone know what the parentification is?
Yeah.
And does anyone want to expound on that?
So I love noticing that in stories, and I hadn't actually like named it in this one, so I'm really, really glad that you did, because it's a common trope for fiction, and particularly for fantasy, I feel, where it's that sort of sense of becoming a parent without actually signing up to be a parent. So it's not literally your children. It might be your younger siblings or older siblings, like in this case, or it might be your niece or your nephew. And it's fascinating when that comes up because it has such an impact on a person. And I hadn't really named that in real life until I started naming it in fiction. And now when I see that in real life, I have a whole different mindset around it. And it's fascinating how, art imitating life and life imitating art can kind of work that way and expand how I think in the real world from what I started picking up in fiction.
And does everyone know what parentification is? Just making sure. Parentification is the idea that the child takes on the roles that a parent should, making sure either the food, like in her case, she was making sure that the family was taken care of. So did anyone want to share or add on that before I change topics? Okay, so one of the things that I found very interesting, and I'm hopping all the way towards the end with this, is Rhysand's. Okay, how do you pronounce his name? Rhysand? What do you guys say?
Rhysand.
Rhysand?
Rhysand. Yeah.
Rhysand.
That's it's a Welsh name, and that is the Welsh pronunciation, so it's the only correct one in my opinion.
And how does Audible say it? I can't remember, even though
Rhysand.
I listened to it on Audible.
Rhysand. Yeah, it says Rhysand. But I will say I'm one of those terrible people who reads when I'm reading fantasy. I read names and then my brain just makes up a name. So he was Rhysand in my head for the longest time, and I don't know why. So he's just Rhys to me because I can't stand either way they sound. So
Well, I find his character very interesting. Before I even ask the question I want, what do you guys think of him as a character? Especially because he evolved so much, I think, in the book.
He's my favorite. No competition.
Same, for real.
Okay, is that because you know more, or is it because of this book?
He was my favorite in the end of the first book too. Just the way he took care of Feyre, even when he didn't have to, and kind of just took her under wing in unconventional ways, but it worked out in the end, and he was working for everyone's good.
Yeah. And he was my favorite without competition by the end of my first read of the first book. So it has been increased by reading the second book, but it still absolutely stood on my first read of the first one.
For some reason, that does not surprise me, Rebecca. Like, that just seems like a character you would love.
I love how well you know me at this point.
I personally like. I don't think I actually said how I felt about her relationship with Tamlin. Is I actually was rooting for him from the beginning because I was seeing things, but as it's progressed, do you guys? Okay, I'm afraid to ask questions because I'm afraid I'm going to find out things I don't want to know. But anyway, so what did you guys think about like his bargain with her or the way that he tattooed her up? What were your thoughts on that?
I didn't like that he literally twisted her arm to do it. I didn't like the way he did that, but he did what he needed to do, especially after reading the second book. He really had to protect her, and that was the best way he could find to protect her.
I definitely think he was projecting some of the shit that he was going through for the last 500 years, and I did like exactly like Noelle said, I didn't love that he got quite so sadistic in that moment. But overall, I think it's a fantastic setup for the next book without spoiling too much. And the only other thought that I really have there is the lack of consent did bug me a little bit. It would have felt better to me if he had mentioned in any kind of passing way the tattoo before she agreed to it. Obviously there were coercive circumstances and those didn't really bug me that much. Like if the options are die or spend a week with this guy once a month, like I would make the same choice. But the elements that were not mentioned and are that sort of permanent and marking and marring, again, this is fairly subjective. I've still got physical marks from my abuser that I really wish I didn't have. So again, very personal, but that little element of it, of I don't like that she has this marking and she had no chance to agree to it, is the only part there that really bothers me.
Either of the Sarahs have a comment?
I was going to say, I think that he came off, went like going back, way back when to my first read through, he did come off very well about you thinking that he is the typical Fae under the mountain. And I was very, very wary of him. But then as you went through, you're like, is he just doing this to get something? And it wasn't until he had that moment in her cell where he was just being brutally honest with her that you started to realize that there was something else going on. And coming back and reading through this again, it was definitely interesting to see like what is actually going on. Like the thing, like him putting his hands in his pockets, like that is such a big thing that he does like 50 times every book. But it was seeing it now in book one, you kind of understood like what is going through his mind in those moments, like when he I can't remember the guy that he took his mind, that you could see that there was something else going on now. So it was very interesting to see that, and I still remember vividly reading the cliffhanger at the end and being just like, what happened, when he like flinches back and you're like, what happened? I have to know what happened. So that made me really excited to see where this was going, because I'm like, this feels like it's all one and done. Like she saved all the Fae, she's gonna live here, she's gonna go get married with Tamlin, and that's the end of that. So it was I really enjoyed to see like what's going to go on with this dude.
Yeah, I enjoyed the fact that he came in so dark. Like you get this dark character that the good guys, if you will, because they took care of all of her needs and she's all in love with them, come into play. And this guy shows up and they're all like super protective of her, want to keep her away from him. He can claw her mind with just like the slightest touch. And so you got this really dark, dangerous, who is this character? And as it plays out, like it just drew my curiosity. I was like, okay, I want to know more about him and why is he this way? How did he get this way? Why are we here? Like, why is he involved? And to be there in the cell with him when she couldn't even get a response out of Tamlin, when he wouldn't even look in her direction. And now we have Rhysand walking over and offering to save her life. And, what a small fee to have to spend a week with him. At the time, though, I was like, it made my stomach turn a little bit. Like, why do you have to spend a week with him? That's intense for a whole month. Like, ooh, what if you don't hit it off? Or what if this happens? Or it really made my mind go down the rabbit holes of like, ooh, I wonder about this. But the fact that he came in so dark and everybody seemed so terrified of him made me be like, I want to know more about this guy because he's got something to offer. You can't be that dark without knowing a lot of pain and hurt and suffering. So he must know something and there must be good coming from this. And I started the beginning of the next book, and so I'm super excited about it. I can't wait to finish it because of the spin that it took.
Can I go off on a tangent based on something both of the Sarahs just touched on? I feel like one of the strongest skills of Sarah J. Maas, at least in this series, is her management of perception. Because especially having read further in the series, and I'll try not to spoil too much for Agnes here, her management of the reader's perception through Feyre's first-person POV is exceptionally good. And it's everything from how she perceives her sisters. I think Noelle was the one that touched on that, and how that perception through her eyes for the reader changes from our first encounter with the sisters to the last. And again, knowing what's coming in the series, how she manages perception of like the animosity between Rhysand and Tamlin, and who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, and everything in there has some sort of negative or positive valence. And the way that Maas handles that perception in every single paragraph is amazing. I like that's what I think is like the core gem of her storytelling, and it's in every single scene, is just that handling of perception.
Actually struggle sometimes with first person point of view, and this one was very interesting just because it was so narrow-minded, and like through her perception, everything, it was like you would think you're reading one book and then all of a sudden it was like bam, there's a new storyline. I'm like, wait, what had just, oh my goodness. And like Rhysand is, how do you pronounce his name?
Yeah, it's
Rhysand. Like that's an example. Or even Tamlin, like that one was a little bit more predictable because I was guessing at stuff. There was of course things that I was very surprised about, but most of it just didn't seem too surprising. But the Rhysand one did, and I thought she did a really great job with that as well.
And like my editor brain clicks into that a little bit as well. And I just want to point out that this is a fantastic example of an author picking the right POV and narrative style choices for the story to be told. If this was in third person or omniscient or anything where it wasn't that narrow, it wouldn't have the same impact because you wouldn't be blindsided nearly as much. So it's fascinating to think about this story if it was written in a different POV and recognize that the author made the right choice there. And it's kind of fun to look at other books and go, well, how would this story have been different if they'd made a different POV choice?
100%. You're spot on there. Because with like Throne of Glass, it's that epic fantasy, it's third person, it's what you expect. And coming into this book, I was really surprised that it was first person. But you were 100% right. Like if it had been third person, it would not have worked nearly as well.
Yeah.
Especially after reading the second book, like seeing all of that now and like understanding more of the story, like having it be first person is perfect.
You have more opportunity to bias the reader in first person because we are so locked into experiencing the story through that one pair of eyes, and that serves this particular story so well.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I like about that too, because not all writers can do it this well, but like I really felt like you got to see her grow more because it was first point of view. Like even especially like her relationship with Nesta, I think that's a huge example of how you could see her grow because all of a sudden she was able to see her sister through a new pair of eyes, and she brought the reader along with her to be able to, so the reader themselves started seeing her. Although maybe you guys saw it from the very beginning. I don't know.
I did not like Nesta at the beginning of my first read of the book. I like her all the way through on my second read, just to be clear.
All right, what were your thoughts about Feyre becoming a Fae? Sarah? You haven't spoken in a minute?
Me?
Yes. There's
Yeah,
two Sarahs. It's hard. Because sometimes I'm looking at her saying Sarah, and sometimes I'm looking at you and saying Sarah. So, yes. What were your thoughts?
Can I not go first on this one?
Definitely.
I can go.
Okay, perfect.
So knowing that there's 5 books in the series, I kind of figured that at some point, she would become Fae. Like that was just that was going to happen. That was for sure going to happen. I was just wondering how they did it because like it's kind of hard with the magic system. I thought it would be kind of hard to make her become Fae, but also we don't know much about the magic system in the first book. And that's something that I think Sarah J. Maas is a little weak on. I love world building, but and she does really well with the world building, but I feel like her magic system is a little loosely based. But with the way they did it was so like it was well thought through and like had like good taste to it. And then at the and it sets everything up perfectly for the second book and the third book. And yeah.
I feel like my only real thought on it is something that I'd wanted to bring up anyway, and that is that I think Sarah J. Maas does a great job of taking her stakes a lot higher than a lot of authors dare to. So having Feyre actually die, like full blown 100% dead. Sorry to anyone who hasn't read the book yet. Is a fantastic choice because I was so locked in on that scene on my first read. I couldn't believe that she just actually killed her protagonist. That absolutely blew my mind. And then having that way out of it almost immediately after, which I agree with Noelle, isn't particularly well set up in her magic system. If I was editing it, I might have suggested that be hinted at leading up to that a little bit. But even without that, I feel like I didn't get like Deus Ex Machina vibes. I didn't feel like it came out completely out of left field. So I was willing to buy it, and I think it was very much worth it to have that escalation of stakes to the absolute max.
I think because the first time I read it, I actually listened to it. And so hearing Feyre as the name, and so like seeing it, I kind of felt like it was kind of foreshadowed in just her name alone.
Interesting.
Okay, so I've been afraid to ask this particular question because I don't want to know too much. So be careful that you do not tell me too much. But what are your feelings about the relationship dynamics between Feyre and Tamlin, and then Feyre and Rhysand or Rhysand? Can you not share because you know too much?
It's really hard to say anything without spoiling.
Yeah. Like, go on.
I was just gonna say that I feel like Feyre's relationship with Rhysand has a lot more of the elements of choice and actual chemistry that I felt were missing with Tamlin. I feel like because there are more players in play at the time when she meets Rhysand, and there are other people who could have stepped into that role or who she could have found allies in, that the fact that he chooses to connect with her and she steps back from her biases and like instilled in her from his reputation, that all creates more chemistry between them than I saw with her and Tamlin. And again, a lot of it has to do with the situation and them actually choosing the other when there are other options to achieve whatever ends they're reaching for.
Yeah, I was almost going to say the same thing, but something on what you said about chemistry is that like when Feyre first meets Rhysand on Fire Night, the first thing she says is, "There stood the most beautiful man I've ever seen." So like there's that instant chemistry, and she definitely needed someone more like sassy and a little more fiery because she's such a fiery spirit herself. And with the knowing what happens in the second book, also understanding that like um Feyre has never been and never will be, let me sit back and let you deal with my problems. She's always been such a, I'm trying not to spoil too much, but she's always been such a, like, let me deal with my problems, let me deal with our problems, we're in this together. And that's something that even in the first book, Rhysand was like, okay, let's figure out a way for us to figure this out and not just me.
And also trying not to spoil book two too much. I really appreciate that Rhysand is resistant to their connection initially. There's something about the fact that her romance, her relationship with Tamlin was so contrived by him. Like, this is spoiling book one, but not book two. He literally was sending some of his closest friends to go die in the hopes of finding someone to fall in love with him. It felt very sort of engineered. So the simple fact that Rhysand, and this gets fully explained in book two, but on Calamni, on the Fire Night, when he meets her, he's like, all right, saved you, nice to meet you. Oh, you don't like me? I'm gonna walk away. Like, just his simple acts of, all right, well, if you don't want this, then I'm not gonna keep trying, says a lot to me just about how he respects her autonomy and how he's not actively looking for that. So the fact that it happens just feels that much more special.
Yeah, like Tamlin wants to save Feyre and wants like everything to be perfect, while Rhysand wants Feyre to have her choice. Like you see this in all the books. Like he respects her choice even when he doesn't agree with it.
Right. And hopefully this isn't spoiling too much, but a great like micro example of that is that Tamlin offers to write her letter for her, and Rhysand teaches her how to read and write.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I also thought too, when Tamlin was in her home in the very beginning of the book, he forces her to leave her family and to come with him. Like he almost kidnaps her basically, to where you're right, at Fire Night, he just walked away. But then the twist, when he did wrap those little tattoo thing around her, that was almost a forced thing too. So there was some pause there of like, wait a minute, are we going back into this again? Is this a pattern, a cycle? But he did give her the choice, and he did support her, and he did get a little bit of joy, humor out of like forcing her to read it. And so, where Tamlin was more like, I have to hide you, I have to protect you, I got to put you away, like you can't be involved in this, you can't know about this. I believe that when they come to pay for being part of the community, and she steps out of line to go the jewelry, it really made Tamlin stop. Like he was offended because she popped his bubble that he was trying to paint this picture of himself. But it made him stop, and it seemed that he had a moment of personal growth. And so I like that Feyre brought that to both of them. But I did, there was some very similar things about both of them. And then there was some really good things about both of them. So,
yeah.
Touching on what Sarah just said about Tamlin like forcing her to leave her family, that's something that always bugged me throughout the first book, is that Tamlin never told her that her family, he said, oh yeah, I'll take care of them, and then nothing more. And Feyre's sitting here trying to escape through like most of the book, trying to find any way she can to escape because she doesn't know what taking care of means to him. And then she comes back and finds out they are living like royalty. Why didn't he just tell her that? It would have made everyone have way less of a headache. Like, it would have made things so much easier if he just said, hey, I am taking care of your family. They are very well off now. Like, they are all good now. Like, you don't have to worry at all.
Tamlin has some serious communication issues throughout. And don't get me wrong, Rhysand isn't a lot better, but he's a little better.
Yeah.
You'd think he'd learned this over 500 years of living.
Yeah.
Right? Seriously.
Like, even Lucian, like, communicates way better than Tamlin.
Speaking of which, we haven't really even talked about Lucian at all. What were your guys' thoughts on Lucian?
He's one of my favorite characters.
He's definitely my favorite too. Okay, so I do have to ask this. Thinking back to your first read or even your second read of ACOTAR, with before you open the second book, who are you rooting for as far as Feyre continuing a relationship, Rhysand, I cannot say that right, or Tamlin?
Rhysand. First read, I loved Rhysand way more than Tamlin, just because he was so sassy.
So I actually remember at the end of my first read through of ACOTAR, I was actually rooting for Lucian. Like,
really?
I think I mentioned right at the beginning that I was kind of emotionally confused for my first read of it, because it was clear that she was not in a happily ever after with Tamlin. Happily for now, absolutely, she'd fought for it, but I could tell the author was setting up for her to not be with him permanently. And I think I just like my brain had somehow like gotten stuck on Lucian, and because I wasn't doing like an editor read, I wasn't trying to be objective. So I'm pretty sure at the end of my first read, I was rooting for Lucian for what that's worth.
When I first started the first book, I rooted for Lucian. Like, I was like, oh, I don't want her to end up with Tamlin. I want her to end up with Lucian. Lucian's so much more fun.
Yes.
I thought she was going to be with Tamlin, but I was very confused by the end of it. I will say that because when this came out, obviously, I did no idea that this was going to be a huge series. And I was like, it was kind of like that. Well, I guess she's going to be with him. Like, she just did all of this for him. And it was like that doubt was there. But you're like, but what else can she do? Like, they've gone all through this. So I didn't know where things were going to go. I definitely didn't expect what happens in book 2. That's for sure.
Part of why it's fun.
I have to say that I too kind of in the back of my mind was rooting for Lucian, even though I knew that wasn't a possibility, because I did like him better for her than Tamlin. But I have to admit, like, I think that I'm probably the most pro Tamlin of you guys.
You haven't read book 2.
Yeah.
That's why I had to ask at the end of book 1, because I wanted to know like what your guys' thoughts were at the end of book 1. So I do plan on reading book 2. I actually did start it, and then I decided, I'm going to just stop right now and I'm going to just listen to it afterwards. But I was pretty sure most of you had actually read either the entire series. Has it finished? There's still one book out, isn't there?
It's never going to finish.
Yeah,
Oh, it's never gonna finish.
Sarah J. Maas is writing the next book right now. Like, it's her next book that's coming out.
I also ended up in the fandom like Noelle, and I've picked up enough to know that I probably won't read past book 2. I'm probably not going to read books 3 plus.
Read book 3 and then you can stop. Like, book 3 and book 2 are like tied for my favorite books. They're so good. But book 4 is great if you need something very lighthearted. That's also fantasy. But I personally really did not like the 5th book. Just the way everything like fell. Like, it is the only book I have ever DNF did not finish. Like, and I read like 3/4 of it, but I just like it's some of the feeling, like some of the stuff that was going on did not feel like, I don't want to spoil too much, but it didn't feel like well based in the characters that we already knew.
Fair.
It was fanfare. I DNF'd at 70% of book 5, 100%. I have no idea what happens in book 4. Literally can't remember the plot line. definitely read 2 and 3. Yeah, book 5 is just fanfare and smut. So if you're into that, smut without connection, I will say. That's why I was like, I'm done.
Yeah, that was
It's
my
the
thing
same
too.
thing. Yeah, if you've read Crescent City, it was the same with me. I finished that book and I was like, I don't care about these characters. And it was that same thing. So that's why I'm like, if you like that, maybe go on, but stick with the 3.
I'm a slight prude, so that means that I will not like it. And I know Rebecca it has to be very central to the plot line. So,
I'm not that picky about my smut, honestly. I tend to enjoy it. Like if it's like a short story and it's just like one sex scene with no connection to anything else, I do prefer it when it ties in with the plot, but I'm not that picky.
all right. Well, thank you guys so much. Does anyone want to add anything else before we wrap up for the evening?
My one thing would be, if you do book 2, get us back so that we can go over things. Because one thing that we didn't talk about today was about mental health representation, PTSD that goes on in this, and what goes on in book 2 is a very good subject to talk about. I didn't want to talk about it because you book 2, so yes, bring us back.
I was actually going to ask if you guys wanted to meet again for book 2. I definitely, because I was originally going to have Fourth Wing next month, but I think I can only handle one of these a month because I have too many other podcasts going on. But would you guys want to meet either in November or December for book 2?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
If nothing else, just to hear you talk about your experience reading book 2, when all of us have had this conversation with you and just been like, I can't wait till she finds out.
Well, that's exciting. So you guys are all invited back. I will just try to decide if I'm going to do November, December. I might send you guys a little link or a little see what you guys think about what I should do for November. But I definitely want to talk about 2. I just will have to finally read it. So anyway, thank you guys so much. And I'm just going to go right back through. You guys just share just a little bit about yourself as far as like the books that you guys have out. I know there's only 2 of you that currently have books out, and the other 2, Noelle and Sarah Janice. Sorry. You guys are aspiring writers, and I can't wait to read what you guys have written someday. And by the way, can any of you tell that Noelle here is 18 years old?
I have been thoroughly impressed, but also 18-year-old me would have gotten along so well with 18-year-old you, by the way.
I absolutely adore her, and I just cannot believe like her mind is only 18 years old. I'm thoroughly impressed by her, and I just wanted to share that. And I know Sarah agrees with me because we both know her on a personal level, definitely. But anyway, Sarah, honey, do you mind just sharing what book you have out, and then Rebecca will go to you, and then I will just say good night.
Yeah, so my book is, I've got it again because it's such a pretty cover, The Last Lunar Witch, which is my alternate world urban fantasy with epic world building. So I like with Sarah J. Maas's stuff, I love world building, so it's very different from everything. I have been told that someone thought that it was like Crescent City, but if the romance took a back seat, because there isn't romance in the first book. And book 2, which is Forged in Moonlight, is out in December on the 5th.
So exciting. Yeah, so I'm Rebecca Hartwell. I am the developmental editor behind Heartbound Editing. That's HART, like the doe or the female deer. And I am an indie author under the pen name Rebecca Maeve Hartwell. And I do the Unlocked series. It's also romantic fantasy. It's got a more modern bent. It's in an alternate reality with Roman themes and auric magic, and definitely some, I don't really want to say dark, but like dark-ish trauma recovery romance, which I love writing so much.
And we did a Meet the Author book club on that a couple months ago. And so definitely read it and then hop over and hear what she had to say, answering some of those nitty-gritty questions that you always want to ask the author after you've read a book. So
Yeah. My mom was on that podcast and she literally finished the book and went in there and she goes, "This needs to be your next book you read. Like, you have to read it. It's so good."
Oh, that's fabulous.
we might have to have Noelle read yours, Sarah Honey, so that way she can be on your Meet the Author when we finally have you on. So anyway, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. I love that this was my very first successful Fantasy Geek Out session. I plan on having these once a month. I wanted to do them once a week, and there's no way I can do that. But anyway, I would love for you guys to meet with us in a couple weeks on October 28th for the next Meet the Author book club. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and then on down from there. We are reading a Halloween special. It's a pretty short book, so I'm kind of excited about that. It's A Myth and Memento Mori by Victoria Clapton. It's a perfect Halloween special. Very excited about it. And then next month, we're going to meet again on November 12th. I am debating between Fourth Wing and doing the second book in the series, which I will eventually decide, and I will let you guys know for sure. But anyway, thank you guys so much.
Thank you for hosting.
Bye.
And you guys can stay on while I disconnect from the live if I can figure it out. I love that this takes me